Okay, this is a very unusual situation. I'm recording offline this time because, oh, you know what? Last time my Kantimala was touching the microphone. Okay, this is an unusual. Okay, so this is a unusual situation because I wasn't given access to the live feed. So I'll just record this class offline. I don't want to wait another month. And let me hide my Kantimala because last time it was touching the microphone. Okay. And today we're talking about fire. And as usual, I'm all prayed up and fired up. See what I did there? And we're going to talk about fire as our guru. This is a series of lessons on the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 7, where, to cut the story short, because I always make a summary of the situation, a Avadhuta Brahmana is instructing Maharaj Yadu over the fact that he has 24 gurus, and that's what brought him to the level of realization he's at. Okay, so did I say? Yeah, I did all my prayers. So let's begin. Fire is the last of the basic, essential, constitutional elements of physical reality. We've seen earth, water, air. Somehow we skipped to ether, and now we're back to fire. So, we saw that in many civilizations and cultures, they pretty much are aware of these constitutional elements. I mean, you cannot ignore them. Excuse me. Yes, it's allergy season in Costa Rica. Sorry about that. So, in many civilizations, they're all quite aware, quite awake to the fact that we're surrounded by fire, earth, air, and what did I say? Fire, earth, air, water, and ether. Some of them include the ether. So they are seen archetypically as archetypes in many what would you call them, systems of ways of decoding our world in which we live. So in the tarot, in astrology, in many ways of say in alchemy, everybody's quite aware of earth, so solidity, liquidity. Fire is just very unique in and of itself. Air, so and ether, and we talked about the movements in a way, the directions that these elements uh, are correlated with. So Earth is all about implosion, is all about going towards the center, and we saw how Earth is how Shri Guru speaks to us as Earth, and why it tells us to focus on the center. And then we saw that with air, it's the opposite. It's all about going out, expansion, expand your horizon, expand your consciousness. So there's a teaching behind all this. Obviously, I'm giving it a Gaudiya Vedantic spin, but it can be drawn, it can be reduced to these. Um, I don't know if the word exists actually, archetypical, like archetypes, like very broad concepts that we can work on. Because to make another aside, as I say every time, this series of verses, this series of lessons based on these verses, are not really to tell you that you should worship the fire because he's your guru, but it's aimed at pointing out that these 24 gurus are just examples of how you should be able to see the teaching, the guru, the divine, ultimately yourself, in any aspect of matter. That's really the point. So any reasoning that you can do to draw meaning out of matter is good. Of course, it's got to be sound. That's why I try to. Obviously, I mean, this whole class is on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Am I qualified to lecture out of the Srimad Bhagavatam? No, but I do have a guru, and he's qualified. So that's where I invest all my what do you call them when you go to a casino? All my tokens, all my coins. And so let's see what comes out. Like I said, I do my prayers, and then I mean, I have some brains. I did think. I happen to wake up in the middle of the night a lot, so when I can't fall asleep, I think of these things. All right, um, so what does fire tell us? We talked about implosion, expansion, and then we saw that water wants to go down, so the direction of water is down, and clearly fire goes up. And ether doesn't go anywhere because it's already all pervading. Ether is a buzz. It's all about vibration and frequency. And we saw that too. Although I couldn't do justice to that because the ether is very elusive. But now we're talking about fire. Pretend you're a caveman. Let's reduce everything to like very basic perception of the world. Which is funny because we're talking about the perception of an avadhuta, so the most realized vision you could possibly have as a human being. But it works also. If you see the world as a caveman, you will see many times that this paradox is there in our philosophy, in our approach to reality. The lowest and the highest tend to coincide, whether you're a fool because you lost your mind, or whether you're behaving foolishly because you're an avadhuta. The behavior is the same, but obviously the what's behind is different. So that's why the gopis act as if they were totally devoured by lust. They leave their husband, they meet with somebody in the middle of the night. It's considered the highest thing in our gradation of spiritual absorption and interaction with God. And yet it is the same dynamics as the lowest possible behavior you could have when steeped in material consciousness. What a break. See, because I'm fired up, it makes me thirsty. I'll try not to make a pun each lesson, each class, but bear with me. Life is about having fun. And I just came from dressing Krishna Balaram, and Balaram is a very funny guy. He presides over Hasya. So, laugh is good, laughter is good. Fire. So, fire goes up. Okay, so considering this vision of the world as a caveman, as a basic man, we saw last time that man, the human experience, the human expression, the way consciousness expresses itself through the human vehicle, is such that it vibrates between divinity and animality. So that's why I was reasoning on this image of man standing on earth and surrounded by air, walking on earth but really functioning in air. Now, every animal walks on earth, depends on the earth, and lives in the air, but flow with it. What I'm saying is that man, if we go with this analogy, can walk in all directions: north, south, west, east, northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest, even down. They can dig, but they cannot go up. So the direction up and fire, so fire goes up, so it points to everything that's divine, that's superhuman. So that's the first teaching of fire. Look up, look at what's above you. And you can see, to take a little detour, that the whole of Vedic perspective or teaching strategy, the whole educational program of the Vedas is aimed at looking up, looking at that. You know, there are so many verses that say tat. They talk about tat. Tat means that. So it talks about that reality. If it's that, it's not me. So I need to focus on something other than me, something above me in this case. Um, and that's also why there's so much emphasis on what's higher, what's lower, that's beneath me, that's higher, higher thoughts, higher consciousness. Why is high any better than low? Because of all this way of making sense that humans have. So let's go with it. Okay, so, excuse me. When you live in the forest, you never know what's making that crackling noise, and I don't want to investigate. So, fire goes up, it tells you to look up, to look above you. So I was saying, as an aside, that the Vedas are always trying to forge your mind in terms of look up, look at who's above you. And that's why you see all these statements about serving, because it's all about the dynamics of service, right? Service should be our ideal and our motor. You know, the wind in our service attitude should be the wind in our sails, but also our destination and our boat. So in the Vedas, you find all these statements of like, you should be subservient to the king, because the king is not a deva, he is God among humans. Within a family, the father, well, say the parents, should be the focus of the worship, of the service attitude, of the affection of the children, who should act as subordinate. In a way, the wife to the husband. It's all a matter of reflecting or seeing the reflection of the dynamics between Purusha and Prakriti. There's always an energy, a source of energy, and an energy. And the dynamics, the dance between the energizer, the energetic, and the energy. And it's got nothing to do with, power tripping or abuse of authority, because I know understandably how many women would think, hey, why should the wife serve the husband? If you read the Vedas, I'm going totally off a tangent, but whatever. If you read the Vedas correctly, which I don't advise it, because it's a lot of like, manusmriti. Okay, if you really want to get into the weeds of that, go ahead, but keep in mind that, well, myself, I speak as a representative of a movement that's very transcendentalist. So, yes, the Vedic knowledge includes these sort of considerations, but ultimately, we're neither men or women. We should just be units of service, units of consciousness, um, waking up to the fact that they're consciousness and acting within consciousness with the rest, with the totality of consciousness that is personified and yeah, personified in Krishna, the supreme personality of consciousness, of Godhead, of the divine. Divine and consciousness are very strictly and intimately related. But anyway, in Vedic society, there's always who you should be subservient to, who you should worship, who you should serve. And that's the part that matters, not who is the king, who is the father, who is the guru, but who is the service, who embodies service. That's where you should see the teaching, because otherwise you just get the lowest possible meaning out of this. You're like, oh, it's all about exploiting, it's all about taking advantage, and why should we be subservient as a child, as a son, as a daughter, as a wife, as a citizen? Just see this social system. You miss the whole boat. It's not about that. Okay, so back to the fire and looking up, looking above you, looking at who is worthy of your service. Now, back to the analogy of the cavemen. I said that up, so the above, is always correlated, tends to be correlated with divinity, because it's everything that's above, out of our power, out of our jurisdiction. So, and also earth and water are very common, again, in the analogy of the caveman. You're constantly crossing through creeks, you're drinking, you breathe without thinking about it, you walk on earth, you sleep on earth, everything you do it on earth. So you may draw, I wouldn't say transcendental, but like you may start philosophizing and thinking in terms of religion or spirituality, but not as much as you do in relation to fire. Because where is fire in nature? You know, um, Fire is, you could say, the sun, but you don't know it's made of fire, right? You just see a lot of light. So it really comes from above as lightning. Of course, you got volcanoes, and there are volcanoes everywhere on Earth where there are humans. My country alone has two. Here in Costa Rica, there are three. I'm from Italy. And in Costa Rica, there are at least three. But unless you live, there was no globalization and instant communication. If you live in a country where there are no volcanoes, you really just see fire when lightning strikes a tree, and all of a sudden you see a tree on fire. And then I guess later on, after a couple of times, especially after men started to harness fire, you realize that the sun is a bigger source of fire. But let's stick with this tree on fire. All of a sudden, you see that fire emits heat and light. So fire goes up, it points to what's up, to transcendence, to divinity, to spiritual thinking. But fire is also all about transformation. You can see that, you know, where there were two pieces of bamboo in the summer of, a place where there's bamboo. I mean, bamboo grows where there's water, but not necessarily. Just whatever, any branches. In California, you don't have bamboo necessarily, but you do have forest fires. Now, I don't know who would be, again, thinking like a caveman, see the fire as it starts. But yeah, you may see accidental fire, you may see lightning, and all of a sudden you see that where there was, just sticks, branches, and air, there's a new substance. And then you just rub when going on with the analogy, when man started to harness fire, you can rub wood. There's no fire in wood, and then you have fire. So it comes from another world. So there's again your correlation with otherworldliness, something above us, something mysterious, mystic. Mystic means it's got mysteries, like something that I cannot quite comprehend, and is therefore above me, and on and on. So you can see how it's very much related to this. And so heat and light, it's otherworldly, and it gives you power over the world, because of all animals, man is the only one who can actually use fire, produce fire. And the implications are profound, they're huge. You would argue anybody knows, and it's like common knowledge, that if you subscribe to a vision, and I don't subscribe or necessarily dismiss the vision of man evolving from Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens, and then like going up in a linear way towards further and further progress, if you can describe today's state of affair progress. So I'm just flowing with one parameter, just so we can make sense of stuff and just draw inspiration. How is fire our guru? But okay, so men harness fire. All of a sudden, like before harnessing fire, because men could have had experience of a tree on fire from lightning, or a forest on fire, and just run away like any other animal. But when you start harnessing fire, all of a sudden You create heat when it's cold. You create daytime when it's nighttime. Light and heat are radiating energies, and again, it comes out of fire comes out of where there was no fire. And if we go with the symbology of it all, light allows you to do things because you see, and so light means knowledge, knowledge means power, and that's how man has the most power over other creatures on earth, that we decided to abuse, but nonetheless it's a state, it's a fact. But so fire is kind of like the link between fire is the element that given man as we postulated it, so as the link between um, what's the word I'm looking for, terrenal, just earthly, earthly, worldly, um, absorption, and air and everything that it signifies, because air, sky is the limit, as we say. Air, sky, sometimes they can be conflagrated into one concept. But the above. So, if we postulate man between these two realities, fire brings man away from its animality and more towards divinity. So that would be one first way the fire teaches us. The fire is our guru, and says, look above you, look up, look toward the divine. And we'll see when the verse is about the sun, how well, more things apply. I'm not gonna um, no spoilers. So what was I saying? Fire brings us in the direction of divinity. And so fire is also correlated with this idea of transformation. From wood and air, you have fire. It's because what is fire? Water. Of course, if you're not a scientist, you don't know. But water is made of two flammable gases. We were talking about the mystique of water last time. How it's a paradox. How it tells us to adapt, like water adapts to the container. And it also says, I am an adaptation myself of two flammable gases. And look at me, I am liquidity personified. Wherever there's liquidity, it's due to the content of water. I still haven't figured out if it applies to oil, but oil does dry up. I know, because people here leave the pan with oil just there, that it just dries up and gets more gunky, and then what are you going to do with it anyway? So yeah, liquidity, if not water, the element of water talks about liquidity and what it means to be liquid, flexible, but we already had a class on that. So fire, what is fire, right? It's not a gas, it's not a solid, it's not water, it's just a state of matter. Yes, there are things that need to burn for fire to exist. So fire depends on oxygen, but it's not oxygen. It's not oxygen on fire. It's not air on fire. I guess you could say it like that. But it's a very distinct and a unique substance that acts very uniquely. So, transformation. Now, let's talk about, since we saw the correlation between fire and religion and spirituality and divinity. Obviously, in our culture, the Vedic culture we all espoused or were born into, there's a lot of fire sacrifice. If you do a Veda-based search on fire, which I may or may not have done, you can see that there is a lot of fire sacrifices being mentioned, and how fire consumes everything. In fact, the verses actually, I am my first, what would you say, critique or criticizer, that I never quite take advantage of the purport of the verses I'm addressing. I kind of give for granted that if you're interested in this series of classes, you will either go see the verse after for yourself, or you have already, because it's written, it's right there. But I don't want to also. I neither want to come across as somebody who uh, believes he's above the purport of the Bhagavatam, and he'd rather talk about the tarot and the Greeks and whatever I talk about to make a point, to drive a point home. So why don't we go ahead this time and read the what 3 or 4 verses from the Bhagavatam where the Avadhuta tells. What was I talking about? The Maharaj Yadu, why fire is his guru. So that's verse 45 of the chapter 7 of the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Saintly persons become powerful by execution of austerities, which, by the way, tapasya, means to burn, which is primarily what fire does. It does give off heat and light and all those not repercussions, implications, but while burning. So fire burns intransitively, or it burns stuff transitively. It burns wood, it burns whatever you offer into it. So so you can see the correlation between knowledge. Knowledge means power. Knowledge comes from light. Light comes from fire. Fire gives, what am I saying here? Fire gives light, therefore knowledge, and therefore power. And austerity also gives power. When you willingly give up something that you could do, it does things. It makes you think, I could be doing this, but I'm not doing it because of higher purpose. As fire tells us, think up, look up, think of what's up. And so that's another correlation. Tapasya. Tapa means to burn. Burn your ignorance with the fire of knowledge. There you go. So saintly persons become powerful by execution of austerities. Their consciousness is unshakable because they do not try to enjoy anything within the material world. Such naturally liberated sages accept foodstuffs that are offered to them by destiny, and if by chance they happen to eat contaminated food, they're not affected, just like fire, which burns by contaminated substances, which burns up contaminated substances. I'm sorry, just like fire, which burns up contaminated substances that are offered to it. I'll read all of them. A saintly person, just like fire, sometimes appears in a concealed form, and in other times reveals himself or herself. For the welfare of the conditioned souls who desire real happiness, a saintly person may accept the worshipable position of spiritual master, and thus, like fire, he burns or she burns to ashes all the past and future sinful reactions of his or her worshippers by mercifully accepting their offerings. Just like fire manifests differently in pieces of wood of different sizes and qualities, the omnipotent Supreme Soul, having entered the bodies of higher and lower life forms created by his own potency, appears to assume the identity of each. Okay, so I believe the next verse is about the moon. Yeah, so we're done. Big concepts expressed here, right? Let's talk about the first. Consuming, fire consumes. Again, transformation. We talk about transformation. You throw grains in the fire. Different civilizations would sacrifice different things, unfortunately. But even in the Vedas, they would sacrifice horses and even cows. So whatever is dear to you, a horse is very valuable to humans. A cow is sacred even. That's what sacrifice means. You make sacred. Um, not well, cows are already sacred, but you take what's dearest to your heart and you sacrifice it. You put it in relation to something higher, with a view of making that higher thing dearest to your heart than what you already consider yourself dear. Yourself, your belongings, your horse, your cow, etc. Now, in Vedic times, they say that Brahmanas had enough tejas, Brahma tejas, spiritual potency through their mantras that were properly pronounced and everything was properly executed, that the cow would come back out of the fire rejuvenated, stronger. Same with the horse. Um, okay, so let me take an aside on that, because in our culture, it is said that if you don't have material desires, you can touch fire and not burn yourself. Oof, man, a whole class could be given on that alone. What comes to my mind is Sita Devi, when Lakshman made a protective ring of fire when he had to rescue Ramachandra. It is said that Sita Devi kind of was absorbed into the fire and taken by the fire god, and then the fire god produced an imaginary, a Maya version of Sita Devi, because how could somebody like Ravana touch Sita Devi, who's pure and worthy of the company of Ramachandra? I mean, they're Purusha and Shakti, they're equally pure, equally transcendental. So that's said, and not said, like that has been said, but they also say that at some point later on in the Ramayana, somebody was putting into question the purity and the chastity of Sita Devi because she's been captive. But Ravana was not known for his morality. He would just steal and rape and do whatever he wanted with whatever, because he had achieved this position of like ruling it over the whole world, and everybody was afraid of him. They'd be like, she may be chaste, but he is strong and powerful, and he may have taken advantage of her regardless. So Ramachandra ordered for a pyre to be lit, and if she was still chaste, she would have been untouched by the fire. So they say that at that time, the fire god returned the real Sita and absorbed the imaginary Sita. Point being that if you don't have material desires, you don't get burned by the fire. And I'm trying to contain myself because it's already 3/4 of the way. And incidentally, I'm cooking lunch today, so I can't go past this time. And I want to not go too wild on this point, which is really, really useful and profound. But let's see the least I can say on this. Fire, if you're pure, if you don't have material desires, you don't get burnt by fire. Well, material desires, matter, for all intents and purposes, means physical matter. So if you're not absorbed in physical gratification, so if you can see that just yogis and various, what are they called, fakirs, they can walk on coals, and but they live on that mental platform. They need to really condition their mind. So it's not your average Tom, Dick, and Harry that can just walk on the fire, because if you're very grossly identified with your gross body, it's all about, ooh, my body got burned. There, all that fear, all that identification. I remember there was an Indian devotee here once who was kind of helping me cook, and he didn't have a whole lot of experience with cooking. So to move a pot over the burner or something, he just thought, if I get over fire, I get burned, scorched irremediably. I was like, just move the pot 1 second. You can put your hand in the fire for a split second. You're not going to get burned and hurt. So he just didn't know that. So you can see that the knowledge, the more you go to the direction of knowledge, philosophy, and spiritual knowledge and spiritual realization, the more, even just as a yogi, you can condition your mind, or wake up to the fact that you're conditioned and just not get burnt. So many people can do it. In Italy, we had a TV host who just controlled his mind and walked, I don't know, 5 meters on red hot coals and didn't get burned. And then they made fun of him. Somebody walked on pizza. 5 meters of hot pizza. Anyway, um, so that concept is there. That's also why Brahmanas should be the ones interacting with fire, doing fire sacrifices, as much as possible cooking, because they don't have material desires, and they say that your level of consciousness is infused in the fire. So especially grains. I don't have time to get into all the what a grain means, the fire and everything. I mean, I have time to get into the fire because that's what I'm talking about, but not in that detail of Vedic sensibility. Um, so Brahmanas should be the ones cooking for God and on the altar, etc. Um, also, fire is considered the tongue of Vishnu. And Brahmanas are the face of Vishnu, the mouth. Mukha means mouth as much as face. So the Brahmanas in the societal body of Varnashram corresponds to the face of God, to the mouth of God. That's why when a Brahmana comes your way, you should just listen to what comes out of their mouth and then stuff their mouth with food, with offerings, because everybody's animals are about annamaya. Plants are all about spreading the seed, reproducing themselves. The animals, surprisingly, they're not about sex as much as they're about food, 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 food. Plants are stuck there. So the food that comes is the food that comes. They may spread their roots, but if there's not enough food, they die. All they care about, and before dying, they do a massive production of flowers, because all that matters to plants is spread the seed. But animals are about food. We saw it with our dogs and cats and cows. Food is like the most important thing. So even for humans who are part animals, food is very important, and that's why it's so purifying to offer food. What would keep you alive to something higher, to a Brahmana, um, who's the mouth of God. And then to the fire, you can see that grains, because we don't sacrifice cows, but grains are really what food means for humans, for, civilized, compassionate humans. Grains is where the fuel is, the carbohydrates, and carbohydrates is connected with carburation, the carbon. They burn and they give us energy. So to sacrifice grains in the fire is, again, giving what's the dearest to us, because if there's a famine, it's not for lack of spinach, it's for lack of grains. And you put those in the fire. Now, if you put grains in the earth, well, you just get grass. you get even more food. If you put grains in the water, you can still change your mind. I was like, you know what? Just pick them out of the water. Yeah, maybe if it's boiling water, you can still scoop them out. And even if you cook them, it's still grains. You can still use them. Grains in the air, whatever, nobody does it. But if you put grains in the fire, and that's the idea, if you put anything in the fire, it consumes it. It transforms it. So back to the idea of the first verse of the Bhagavatam. I'm not going to have time. But I recorded late. Let's see how long I've been going. It doesn't say. I'll try my best. So fire transforms stuff. When you put grains in the fire, the banana in the fire, it represents what's dear to you, or what you think is you. They say that when you take initiation, you put the banana on the fire, which symbolizes your not your guru, your ego. Once it's in the fire, it's in the fire. It's gone. So you need to transform. That's what fire calls you to do. To change. To look for that energy that comes out of nowhere, that energy that's behind matter, to look for consciousness behind matter, whether it's the two branches that you rub or anything. Because Again, these verses are not about the very detailed element and the guru being the fire or the fire being the guru. It's all about, if you can see it, seeing consciousness behind matter and acting in a correspondent way. So, fire teaches us to look behind matter. Like the verse was saying, there is fire in wood, even if it's not manifest, to look for the unmanifest, for the unknown, for the realm of infinite possibility, which is Vaikuntha. And within Vaikuntha, if you're a Gaudiya, look for Vrindavan and that realm of that vibration, that frequency to vibrate at. And it tells you that to do that, you need to change. Like fire changes. Fire, fire is a substance that you cannot put your finger on, quite literally. It's like, what is fire? How can you draw fire? I guess you can draw fire quite well if you're an experienced artist. But what is the shape of fire? So it's constantly changing, and it changes whatever you put in it. So fire teaches you to change, exhorts you to change. Change yourself. Burn anything that you think is yourself until what is left is yourself. You, the real you. You got to burn everything you think you are. You need to transform yourself only to become what you've always been. You need to constantly change, become something else. Really change your level of consciousness, because everything is here, everything is there at the same time. To an infinite degree, eternity is already here. Everything is absolute, right? It's not like, try not to think of this world as a material bubble where the absolute, where things are not absolute, where the infinite has no jurisdiction. Here things are finite. This is not the infinite world, this is the finite world. Things are not eternal here. That doesn't stand to reason in Vedantic terms. If something is infinite, it pervades everything to an infinite degree. So the only limitation is our limiting beliefs and, our state of consciousness. Even matter is infinite. Our material consciousness is what creates this bubble of space and time, which are limiting beliefs. Time is a thought, is a concept. Animals don't have a sense of time as we do. You could say because they're inferior in their intellect, but meanwhile, we are the only ones who are really trapped by time and space. So that was another detour, but a very good one, because it's really what's at the base of these teachings. Forget the fire. But anyway, going back to fire. Fire calls us to change, to consume everything that's not, like these verses were saying, burn the karma. You're called to adopt activities that we talk about burning karma all the time. It's a very apt analogy. And the guru burns our karma by pointing us in that direction. And then ourselves, we should follow in that direction and remove ourselves from any involvement, so karmic involvement. See this world of results, as I call the material world. It's the world of results. It's the world of what's already happened. It's the world of the past. It's got nothing to do with the future, the bright, bright future. Like the fire is there to symbolize. Look towards brightness, infinite possibilities in front of you. Now, you can choose, you can choose to just adopt possibilities that make you rich and famous. But among the infinite possibilities, the message of the Bhagavatam is look at the highest possible thing, the highest potential of the soul. And that's what it now they realize that I don't have access to the Zoom call, whatever. So what was I saying? The highest possibility, but for all intents and purposes, the future means infinite possibility. You may have heard me say that what do I say? I don't remember. the value of matter is zero, and the value of spirit is infinite. The potential is infinite, and the infinite is already here. You just need to see it. You just need to change your level of consciousness. So, not bad for seeing all this out of a candle, out of a fire, out of your burner. Imagine you could just light your burner and cook, make popcorn, and realize the absolute. Have thoughts of your guru and what your guru symbolizes. Um, so yeah, fire tells you to burn everything that is not any contaminant, because material consciousness is a contamination for pure consciousness. All of a sudden, imagine you're pure consciousness with infinite potential, and material consciousness makes you think in terms of space and time and limitation. I'm a man, I'm white, I have green eyes. If I'm here, how can I be there? If it's here, how can it be there? You apply it to the divine. Well, if it's like this, how can it be like that? Do me a favor and don't think in spiritual terms. Well, don't think spiritually in geographical terms and anatomical terms, because you'll just lose from the beginning. Obviously, you need good guidance. You need a guru who can show you how the scriptures point towards this, and whatever is said about the spiritual world is out there, and the seven coverings. The material universe is said to be covered by all the I don't remember, like it's perceived as a bubble, and there's like a layer of ego, and then a layer of intelligence that's like twice as big as that one, and then a layer of mind, if I'm not wrong. Maybe it's just a physical element, and then there's a layer of ether, and then a layer of um, fire, and you've got to pass all these layers to get to the spiritual world. That's like saying that yes, the spiritual world is virtual. So pretend there is a video game in my computer, and in that society of the video game, they say that to get into the real world, say I tell another player actually, um, you need to get out of the pixels, and then get out of the software, and then get out of the hardware of the computer. No, yes, because the game, what you're invested in with your consciousness, and you really think you're in the game. Some people really lose their minds. There are some Chinese adolescents who just, I'm sure it's all over the world, but they have to go to rehab because they just are so invested in those games and the dynamics and the money they accumulate in the game, and the family they make in the game, and the popularity they achieve in the game. Making it up, I'm not a gamer. That they close the windows, they don't want to go out, they have their parents feed them through under the door, or they just leave the food. They don't want to see their parents, they don't want to get into the living room. It's like, living room, it's got nothing to do with the fantastic world of the video game, in which I'm such an important person, let's assume. But really what they need to do is turn off the computer, get the cyber goggles, the helmet, the glove, the cyber glove off, take them off. They don't need to get out of the computer physically. They just need to consciously realize. So that's precisely what we're asked to do in this material life. I was thinking the other day how amazing it is that we dream. I have crazy dreams. I just had a crazy dream this morning because we are already asleep to our potential as souls. As souls, we belong in a totally different realm, in a totally different dimension where we could function so much better. We would be consciousness relating with consciousness. But we're asleep to all that, and we're absorbed in this world that we call life, reality, which is actually Vishnu's dream. A piece of advice: whatever is said of Mahavishnu is not an allegory, but it's like an archetype of what is true of consciousness. And since we are consciousness, it's true of us too. So what does Vishnu does? He's asleep, and his nightmares are the material world. and he may get invested in them. Um, well, that brings up or about the concept of Sadashiva and how Shiva is Jiva, as they say. But down to the spec, to the Jiva, that is consciousness being absorbed in this dream. So we are within a dream of, well, as soul, whether you take consciousness as us, the Jiva soul, or as you see the material world as the dream of Mahavishnu, who is the Vishwatma, the consciousness of the universe, it's we're asleep to our true potential, our true reality, and the fact that we dream inside of this dream is far out. I wonder if any one of you ever dreamed of dreaming. Not realize that you're in a dream, but like dream that you are in bed and then a dream starts and then you see that dream. It's crazy, the meanders of the mind and how complex reality really is. So I'm running out of time. Let's see if I can talk about the other points. If I can get out of Zoom. So we talked about consuming anything that is not you so that you can finally act as you, and transforming yourself. And then let's see, the other verse talks about, yeah, the fire being unmanifest, but then it manifests in the world as the super soul through his energies. And keep in mind that Jiva Shakti is one of the Shaktis of the Supreme Soul, of God, of the Shaktiman, appears to assume the identity of each. Okay, so I guess we talked about all this. All right, so I did a fairly good job on talking about, not on no, I didn't do justice to the matter, but I did take some notes and I went through them mentally. I didn't write anything this time. So I am going to figure out how to upload this on YouTube and just talk to whoever the administrators are. And I think something has already changed. And so from next time, I should be able to get access to Zoom and just manage the situation better. I'm just glad I could record this, and I still have time to cook lunch, and life is perfect. All right. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Ki Jai.